I'm in the wrong camera. Oops. Are we live or not yet?
You are.
I am live. What, people can hear me and everything.
People can hear you. There are
Fantastic.
no viewers yet.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, you tell me when we're good to go, because at the moment I can't see anything. Right.
Well, you have 7 viewers at the moment.
Fantastic.
So
Hello, everybody.
hello.
Hi. In a minute, we are going to go and have a look around my studio. Oh, I've got feedback. Bear with me one moment. Ben is just adjusting the sound because I can hear about 6 versions of myself in my ears, which is very disconcerting. Yeah. He's still working on it. There we go. I think he solved that problem. Thank goodness for that. Now I can concentrate. So we are going to have a look around my studio in a moment. So welcome to a slightly different view. We're in a corner of the area where I teach. So what you can see behind me are the desks for the students and an exhibition of my monoprints. And tonight I'm going to be doing a sort of little demonstration of what I've been doing with monoprint so that you can see. And I would really welcome your questions about that, but also feel free to ask me about Lino if you want to as well. And hopefully that's going to come up on Ben's chat, because at the moment I can't see any chat, so I can't read what's being said. So Ben's going to have to do that. No, that's fine. You can field those. Are we ready to go on our tour of the studio, Ben?
We are, but I'm going to give you this. So
right. Okay. Ben is going to give me the chat as well, so that I can, which is kind of nice because it's nice when people come and say hello and stuff. So
the chat's down here.
Okay.
Okay.
Lovely. I'm just going to prop that up because I can't see it. Hello, Michelle and Perry. Hi, and Tara. And I'm just working out how to prop that up. Okay, so...
Well, we have a few viewers now.
Lovely. Okay, let's go and have a look around the studio then.
Okay. So
Ben's going to put us onto his camera and a gimbal, and we'll go and have a look. Okay. Wait till you're switched on. I'm going to show you around. That's it. Good. Fantastic. Let's go and have a look. So we'll start in the gallery part of the studio and come through here, and let me start with our new old door. So to explain, we have this massive front door, which hopefully you can see. That is 4 foot across, and that's we think the house was built at about the 1830s or 1840s, so that's the front door. But what I want to be able to do in the summer is prop it open, and we have just, or rather I should say Ben has just done a proper shop door for me, because when we arrived in this house, this was completely boarded in. And I think the last time I did a studio tour, that was just wall there. But now it's a door. And the big bonus was that when we stripped off the panelling that was covering it up, the door was still inside. So all Ben had to do was to strip the old paint off and put some glazing in and fit the shop bell. So we're all set up now for Spring Fling. So to have a little look round, I have on this wall I've got some Japanese wood blocks here in the corner, and a couple of prints. So it's kind of nice to have. These Japanese wood blocks. They're a combination of Japanese wood block and wood lithography. If I hold this one up in front of the screen so you can see it properly, this is mokuhanga, so traditional Japanese wood block, but it's combined with mokulito, wood lithography. So the outline of the rocks here is done using a greasy drawing on wood and printed as a lithograph, and it's all tied in with the woodblock printing there, so a sort of mixed media piece. So I've got that on the wall to show people. And then if we come along here, we have Doris, who is minding the shop, but also I'm going to get Ben to look out the window, just in case any of you are local and are planning to come to the show, to point across to my mate Joshua and his wife Angela, who've got the studio opposite, and they will be open for Spring Fling as well, and they've got a fantastic exhibition up. So if you're in the area, then do visit them as well, because they've got some marvellous prints. And then in the middle of the room, if you've been here before, you'll have seen this, or if you've seen a tour before, you'll have seen my little printing press. So this is the press that started me as a printmaker in about 2005, and it's 1851, and we've put it in the wrong place because it's not very well positioned. We thought middle of the room would be great, but we're actually going to unbolt it and move it closer to the window, so when I'm teaching I can use this space a bit more effectively. So that's got to be moved, but it's still a nice press and I still use it. And when I have students here doing lino cut, they get to use it as well if they want to. So over here, if I can just show you, I've got one of my biggest ever lino cuts up. And this is called Rain and Light West Coast. And it's a reduction print. I've forgotten how many layers, but they've got to be probably more than 20 in there, because the C, I remember, was a bit of faffing. And also my Printfest award, I was very pleased this year's Printfest I got an award, which has allowed me to have lots of new printing ink, so I was very grateful for that. And then the back wall, these are all prints you've probably seen on my YouTube channel. Some of them are local and some of them aren't. But I'm exploring the new landscape when I can get out from doing chores around the house. And so those are all up and ready. And I'm just going to get Ben to swing around so that you can have a little look at what else is on the wall there. This one here is an album cover that I did, and there's the CD that goes with it. So that was for a folk album for Janice Burns and John Doran, who do folk songs, and I was very pleased to collaborate with them on their first album cover. And then Ben has just managed to get this one framed, so that's the tide pools at Rockcliffe Beach. Rockcliffe Beach is the sort of local kind of big tourist beach that everyone seems to go to, so it was kind of nice to get that one framed up in time. Always a bit of a rush. So this is the kind of gallery area where people can come in off the street and have a look at what I do. And then if we go back into the room, through here you can see all my teaching stuff, and we're just in the teaching area tonight. We've got my brother-in-law is hiding in my studio bit, tucked out of the way, and we thought we'd do this in here. I'm going to get Ben to just have a little look at these monoprints, if you would, Ben.
You want to sit up first?
Yeah, because this is what I'm going to be sort of demonstrating, really. So these are monoprints that I've been working on. So they're one-off pieces, and I wanted to display them tonight, but the big problem was that they're on paper. I can't frame them yet, and I absolutely don't want to damage them. So what I came up with was an idea to cut strips of washi paper, and I've sewn seams at the end. So there are 2 strips of paper that are joined at the end by a seam, and each seam supports one side of the paper. So there's a seam for this strip down here, seam for this strip along there, and together they hold that corner secure, and with strips all the way around, all the corners are protected and held secure, and that means that I can display that big print without in any way impacting on that paper, so it's protecting it completely. So that's how I'm supporting them, and that print, incidentally, that big print, was all printed by hand, no printing press on that one. And this one, the others that I'm going to show you did have a printing press. And if you want to come and look at this one here, one of the things that I like best about working in this technique, quite apart from the fact that it allows me to draw, which I'll show you in a little bit, is how you can manipulate the ink. So if you could come in on this rain, I just want to show you how it's possible to get in there and actually sort of scratch away and do all sorts of layering techniques, which I really enjoy. This is all new to me. This may be very familiar to you. So if this is sort of stuff you know already, then I apologise. But I've only just started working on this. I was introduced to this by Joshua Miles, the artist who I was just telling you about, who's done live streams with me. He monoprints in a different way, but he introduced me, and now I've started working in my own version of it. So here you can see how you can sort of build up. You can build up sort of painterly layers, but also I like the contrast between the kind of softness of the sea and the very graphic rocks that I've been able to draw in there. So it's nice to have that kind of flexibility. And then this final one I'm going to get Ben to look at here is called Cooper's Beach. Cooper is a friend's dog that we went to this beach with. And you can see there how I'm using that yellow around here. A lot of the rocks have that very bright yellow on, and I'm kind of manipulating the ink to highlight that. So those are the monoprints, and they are a mixture of oil pastel and printing, and that's kind of what I was going to talk about. So I'm going to get Ben to come back to the seat. Okay, hi, so back again. So before I get on to the monoprinting, I had a question from a lady who can't be here tonight, and she asked me, she said that she'd heard that I was now saying that instead of using lots and lots of extender, I was working with more solid paint, but I was rolling it out thinner, and what were the benefits, the pros and cons of each method. So to get that out of the way first, the reason that I have changed the proportions of extender and paint is there's 2 reasons for it really. One is the problem that I have with the extender. When it's stored, you can get an effect called transient chromophores, where the extender will actually go brown or yellowy brown when it's been in a plan chest for a long time, and then it needs exposing. Oh, I can hear that.
I think we solved that problem. Thank goodness for that. Now I can concentrate. So
right. I'm not sure what Ben's doing at the moment.
So welcome.
Just bear with me one moment. That's it, he's killed it again. Sorry, we had an interruption there. So the transient chromophores, if you have extender, which has no pigment in it, the linseed has chromophores that will yellow if it's in the dark. And then when you put the print out into daylight, it will correct and the yellowing will go. But it is disconcerting if you have a print with a lot of extender and that's hidden in a drawer, and when you get it out, it doesn't look like it did when you printed it. So I was a little bit concerned about that. So I thought, well, if I put more pigment into the extender, I'll maybe avoid that yellowing effect. So I started using, maybe rather than 90% extender, I dropped that to maybe 50% extender. And to compensate, I started rolling the ink out very, very thin. And I find that's resolved it quite well, actually. And the other benefit is that extender can be a bit like, it can be a bit sticky and stringy. And so dropping the proportion of extender has really, really helped with the stickiness. But the trade-off is very, very thin layers of ink. Now, I like that, but not everybody does. So I think you have to weigh up the balance between, are you worried your print is going to go a bit yellow if you store it, and you have to then bring it out into the sunshine to adjust it? Or would you rather have very, very thin layers that might show the texture of the paper through them, but you avoid that problem? So it's a kind of a trade-off. But that's why I've gone from using huge amounts of extender and very little pigment to a rather more equal balance of extender and pigment. So anyway, I am going to now talk to you a little bit about monoprinting. So I'm just checking here if I've got any questions, and I'm hoping that Ben will read out questions as they come in if you've got them. So to do the monoprints on these walls, which as I say is a very new process for me, I've been using this very, very flexible acrylic, and what I've been doing is I've been drawing and doing a drawing on paper, and then I've traced that drawing simply by putting the acrylic down on top of the drawing and doing a tracing through. And this is 0.75 mil. I keep saying it's acrylic. Is it acrylic? I don't know. Is this acrylic?
It is.
It is acrylic, yeah. So it's acrylic sheet, and it's very, very thin. And so when I do my tracing, I use one of these. I'm not sure which camera we're on at the moment.
You're on this camera.
That camera, right, okay. So this is a permanent pen. I like to use a very fine permanent pen. Yeah, I'm going to get Ben to put me on the top camera here. I'm sorry if this sounds a bit disjointed. I've lost the screen image, so I can't see myself. That's better. So I'm using permanent pen and drawing my image. Here I've drawn a very, very quick sketch of some rocks onto my acrylic. So
did you want the top camera? Sorry.
Yeah, can you put it on the top camera? That would be lovely. Okay, so if I put it onto the light box so that you can see, this is like, I remember when I was at school they used to use overhead projectors, so this is very like that school experience. Incidentally, what you can see reflected there is our studio lighting. So when I started teaching, one of the things that I wanted was incredibly bright lighting, because I've taught a lot of freelance teaching in other people's art schools and things where the lighting is always rather dim. So I asked if we could have really bright lighting. And these are LED warehouse lights, which we bought on eBay. They come from China and they are unbelievably bright, but also very affordable and very cheap to run. So we've got my studios lit up with these kind of, they're like daisies of LED lights, and they're fantastic if you have a space to light for working in. So, oh, and you can get them in various warmths as well, so you can get kind of a daylight effect. So I've done my drawing using my permanent pen, and I like a fine one to draw with. When Josh introduced this to me, he uses quite chunky pens for drawing. So I've done my drawing, and what I would like is for that drawing to not interfere at all with my monoprint, and I also want to reverse the image so that when I print it, it comes out right. So that's really simple. If you work on a thin sheet of acrylic like I do, because I can simply flip the acrylic over, and then I've got my drawing which is on the other side. The acrylic is so thin that I can't, there's no distortion really in that inking up. So that's got me my drawing reversed and also completely protected. Now, if I decide that I want to make adjustments to that drawing, then I found the best thing to use is meths. So I use methylated spirit for removing the pen without damaging the acrylic. It seems to work very well. I know there are a lot of people who worry about toxicity, and I'm just showing you what I do. I'm not suggesting that this is the only way to do it or even the best way to do it, but I'm going to tell you what I do, and then you can decide yourself whether you like that or not. So that will correct my drawing, and I'm going to also show you to attach the paper. I've got my printing paper here, and all I've done is I've taped it to the top of the plastic. So you can see that it's just taped, and this is Reeves paper. It's about 280, 290 grams, so it's quite a heavy paper. And when I first talked to Josh about this, he uses an etching press for his monoprints, and I have one here which I started using for them. But with the very big one that I showed you just now, it was too big to go through my press, so I was going to borrow Josh's, and then it was really difficult. So I just started printing it by hand, and actually it worked really, really well. So I can't see the chat lobby. Is there anybody asking any questions while I'm rattling on like this?
We have
No questions? Please feel free to ask questions. Don't make me do all this on my own, please. Right, you're allowed to ask whatever questions you like. Ask me about Doris if you want. Give me something to talk about. So I'm going to mix up some inks. And what I've got here is I have got extender here. And this is the Safe Wash extender. And I would normally use traditional oil-based inks. I use Cranfield's, but I also use Lawrence's as well.
I'm going to pause you just for a moment. I'm going to put you on the face camera.
Right.
Because I think we can get closer on the other camera.
Oh, okay. He's going for the serious close-up when I'm...
Well, not serious close-up, but closer.
Yeah, I'd have done something about my makeup if I'd known it was going to be a serious close-up. So I'm going to keep talking about... Ooh, extender. Well, Ben figures that one out. So I would normally use a traditional oil-based extender. I prefer it to the Caligo extender because I find the Caligo extender is very, very soft. You can see there it's quite gloopy. But in this instance, it's very, very good because I'm going to be wiping paint away rather than cutting a block. So it's going to give me a lot less hassle when I come to wipe away, because I can wipe away with a damp cloth rather than having to worry about using white spirit or a solvent of some sort in order to get my monoprint prepared for printing. So I've got the Safe Wash extender here, and here I've got some Safe Wash white, because these are going to form the bulk of my printing ink. So all that conversation before about extender and adjusting the amount of extender I was using, that's really applicable to the lino cuts that I'm doing, not so much the monoprint. So I'm going to use a fair bit of extender
I'm taking you
for
back
that.
onto the other camera.
Okay, we're going to go back onto the other camera. And, oh, I have only got 2 palette knives. I might ask Simon in the corner to pass me some palette knives. So I'm going to mix up a couple of colours. We'll go with a nice sort of, let's have a sort of bluey grey. Thank you very much, Simon. So I'm just going to, I'm going to be inking this probably in one hit, so I need a good range of colours. So I'm going to go with, this is, so I've got raw sienna here, I've got a cobalt blue, and I've got Jackson's Payne's grey. So that's Jackson's traditional oil-based Payne's grey, which I really like. It's a really nice neutral colour, and I can't get that in traditional oil from, let's have a greeny colour. So I'm going to start with the cobalt, which cobalt and raw sienna makes this really lovely greeny colour. Let me just hold that up to the camera so that you can see it. It's a really nice kind of bluey green.
I'm not sure the camera's doing it much justice, actually.
No, it's maybe not.
Looks much nicer in reality.
Yeah, everything looks nicer in real life. It's always kind of, people say that when they come into the studio. It's like when they see the prints for the first time, it's always much nicer to see them in real life. So what I've found with this monoprinting is that it's nice to have some contrast between the colours so that you can see good variations. Now I think I've got a question here. I'm going to read it out so that if people watching the recording can hear. Can I ask you about turpentine? Usually what's used by oil painters, turpentine, oh, I can't read it because there's something in the way. Sorry.
Can be used also in oil-based inks in printmaking to make inks more thinner on paper. Right.
I don't use turpentine with to make the inks thinner for my monoprints. I use white spirit, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I use white spirit. I use the low odour stuff, which is considerably more expensive, but really is pretty good to use. It's pretty fume free, and I work with that. So I know, I don't see why turpentine shouldn't work. It would be worth experimenting with for sure, but maybe other people know better than me about that. As I say, this is still fairly early days for me. So nearly there. Let's just have one more. What should we have? Let's see if we can go with a real yellowy colour. So with this, I have now got 5 shades of various sort of rocky colours. So what type of ink am I using? I am using a mixture here. So I have got Safe Wash Caligo Extender, Caligo White. So those are, they're oil-based, but they are a polymerized linseed, which means that they're water washable. And then on this side, I've got oil-based, traditional oil-based inks. So those are not water washable, but when you mix them with mostly water-based inks, you can push them around using a wet cloth. So you can kind of manipulate them like you would Safe Wash, providing that Safe Wash makes up the bulk of the mixture. So I will show you. So these are relief inks. These are what I would be normally using. The Safe Wash is what I would teach with. The traditional oil-based is what I would normally choose to use in my own work. So I'm just going to get these out of the way here. As always, it's a bit of a compromise when you're demonstrating, but I'm going to do my best not to get too untidy. And I'm going to do a little bit of printing, and I'm going to be using these little wire rollers. I think these are made by Abig, and I really like these. I have quite a few of them. They're great for sort of small amounts of inking up. They do larger sizes, but I tend not to go for those because these are quite hard, and so I don't find that they're as sympathetic to print with when they're larger sizes. But a hard roller that's this small is neither here nor there, so they print very nicely. So I've got to start getting my inks in order. So I've done a drawing onto that acetate, onto the acrylic rather, but I'm not necessarily going to stick precisely to the image that I have drawn. I'm going to sort of coax the picture out. Can I have a couple more small rollers then? Thank you. That's great. And I'm not going to do terribly thin layers with this. And what I'm going to do is let's have a little think about this. I'm going to start just applying ink where I think it might work nicely. So I'm roughly following the drawing, but not specifically. Excuse me. Just laying down that ink. And maybe this one, I'm going to do as a sort of, let me get this off here. So I'm not particularly following any rules, I'm just thinking where I might like to put stuff. And I also quite like that I can put the ink on either quite thick or thin. Here, if I hold it up to the camera, where I've got this pebble, you can see I'm just putting it on very thick as sort of splotches. Let me get this right up to the camera. Bear with me one moment because it's the reverse I'm looking at. Yeah, there you are. So you can see it's going on not in a sort of cohesive layer, it's going on in splotches. And you can fool about with this as much as you like. Now, because I'm assuming you've all got homes to go to, I'm not going to do lots of layers. But I'm going to try and make this interesting so that you can see.
I think they're actually at their homes. Look.
You think they're at home? Well, they probably are at home, but they've probably got stuff to go off and do, or see, or...
Elle says, are you mixing the oil-based inks with the Calico Safe Wash inks?
Yes, I am, and they will mix absolutely fine. You won't have any problem doing that. You can mix Safe Wash and oil-based. It's not a problem. What you can't do is mix water-based ink with oil-based ink. So I couldn't, for example, get away with mixing something like graphic chemical water-based ink with the Calico or the oil-based, but certainly the other way will work. Where should we go now? Let's have something a bit darker. I've mixed up masses and masses of ink here, and I don't really need it, but I'm going to mix a little bit of darker ink in here.
Archieworks says, do you think monoprinting gives you more opportunity to experiment and be more free with concept of a piece as it is a one-shot deal?
It does. I mean, the thing for me that I like about it is that it's forcing me, or at least the way that I'm working here, is it's forcing me to get away from the precision that I would have following a drawing or indeed working where I'm cutting, because I'm laying down this ink fairly, well, as you can see, fairly randomly in order to create my image, and I'm just playing, and so that's very freeing. What isn't freeing is the fact it's one piece, and when you're working on a big piece, trying to keep that clean, especially when there are large areas of white paper, that's really tricky. So I'm tipping it up so that I can kind of refer to my drawing a little bit here. The other thing that I have got here is a light box. I used to, in my other life working in the photographic industry, I used to work as a picture researcher, a photographic picture researcher. And I used to spend my days leaning over great big ugly bulky light boxes. They didn't exist in this form back when I was doing that, and it would have been great if they did, because I used to spend all my days choosing photographs for magazines and books and things like that, and it would have been helpful to have had this. So you can see how I'm not rolling that ink, I'm actually laying the ink down, and I can see a little bit of my drawing, not too much. Now Josh Miles, when he does monoprinting, he is much more precise than this. He's working in layers and he's controlling much more carefully where the ink is going. I'm just messing about really. So I'm also using this one, which I've had for years. I don't know who it's made by. I suspect that might be A-Big as well. And I really don't use it except occasionally, like here where I want to put stripes in. Can you hear Betty? That's Betty shouting in the background there. Okay.
Kelly Logan wants to know, would it be easier to use brushes rather than rollers?
I guess you could use brushes, and certainly there would be times when a brush would be fantastic. But I kind of like the fact that when I use a roller, I have less control. Also with a brush, you'd have to be a bit more careful, I guess, about perhaps about how thick you're putting it on. You know, a roller kind of spreads the paint out a bit. Right, okay, I'm getting to the end of what I can do here in one layer. Maybe we'll just have a little bit down there. And I have made it very mixed up to show you kind of the effect. And the next thing I have to do is, oh, I've missed a bit there. Let's just get the end of that rock on. We have a lot of rocks around this way, which are a really beautiful mixture of colours. So I'm just playing with that. Okay, so now I've got that on. Now I have to neaten it up and wipe it off. And for that, I'm going to use a damp cloth. Here I've got, for the purposes of this, I've got a wet wipe. Any sort of wet wipe will do the trick if you use Caligo inks. So what I'm doing is I'm following the edges here to get rid of the ink that I don't want. And the reason that it's kind of coming off reasonably easy is because I'm using Caligo Safe Wash ink, which is water. You can clean it with water. So when I use a wet wipe or a wet cloth, it will take it off. So I am just starting to take away the ink where I don't want it. And I'm going to go back in and refine that. So those big prints, if I could ask Ben...
Well, I was going to come in and do a close-up.
Oh right, okay, because I was going to ask you to go and look at those bigger prints so that people can start to see.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to come in and do a close-up of the...
Yeah, come and show some of the
here.
textures on the print, because I really like them. And I think you would struggle, Kelly, I think you'd struggle to get this with a brush. It's easy to do with a roller, but if I can get Ben to show these kind of stripes and spots and things, do watch yourself on those inks, you get a really lovely texture. And I'm going to get Ben to show you a close-up of some of the prints that I have done.
Any in particular?
Well, I guess the one nearest you, the big one, the big boy. will give people a good idea. So I stuck on one side, I stuck to a very restricted colour palette, as you can see. Now, and the other side I got quite colourful. So Ben's looking at the colourful side at the moment, but actually the other side I was sticking to a more restrictive palette. Now I'm not being too careful here about going over the lines, because this print essentially doesn't matter too much, but I might be more careful with another image if I was working on something or I had a bit more time, but for this purposes this is not too terrible. Now that wiping is okay, but it's not great. I will still get dirty ink marks on the paper if I leave it in that state. So I am going to refine it.
I'm going back to
a little bit.
Top Can.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to refine it using earbuds. These, we've got I've got two sorts here. I've got some that are card based and some that are bamboo based, and the bamboo ones are a little bit more expensive, but they are stronger. So when I'm manipulating them to wipe up, they're actually a bit better for getting into the corners. The cardboard ones can break a little bit. So I'm just going to come in and take that out. So you can see it's, when you think it's wiping instead of cutting, it sounds like it will all be very quick, but actually it does take a little bit of time to clear these out. And some areas are quite small, and what I do is to use my teeth just to pull out a bit of a thread, and then I can get in and wipe out the small detail. I'm sure there's a sort of more glamorous way of doing it, but that seems to work quite well. I'm just going to go back in there. So I'm tidying up all the time and thinking about spaces. Now with this technique, it's not going to give me the precision of cutting. It is a bit of, because I'm wiping, it's a softer feel to it. But I kind of like that, it's nice, and I can tighten it up with the drawing later. So, okay, let's go with that. So now I've done that, and the problem I've got now is that I've isolated my rocks, but there's still dirty smears there, and I'm just going to check my drawing and see that I have got that right. Yep, that line is supposed to be down there. So these little bits of ink will show if you print them, and that can be a problem. So I am just going to go around and make absolutely sure I've got rid of them. If, like me, you like a clean white piece of paper with no ink on it, then you really have to work at the wiping. And I may not get rid of all of these tonight, just because I'm very conscious of the fact this isn't the most scintillating thing to look at. But I'm going to do my best to get rid of them. But because I've discovered that these print very well with just a hand pressure, it does mean that I can do great big ones, which has been very pleasurable indeed. So if I was printing layers and layers of colour, then the odd little bit of ink wouldn't really matter because it would be hidden. But when there's nowhere to hide, you have to be very careful. And I've had to shut the cats out of the studio as well, which they've hated.
Ellie says, apologies, but I missed the beginning of the live stream. Did you draw on the acetate with a permanent pen?
I did.
And will the recording be available later so that we can watch it all again?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes, I think it probably will, yes. Okay, so now, effectively, I have my...
And Kelly wants to know how long you have before the paint starts to dry.
Oh, long time. because they're oil based. The Calico stuff will skin. I've just noticed there's dirt on my light books and not on the print. Calico, I find, I don't know if you guys use Calico, but I find it skins after about sort of 24 hours, you start getting a skin. So if I left these inks here, if I left them out, then I find that they're unusable in about 24 hours or so. What you could do is to put them into tin foil and wrap it up like a cone, and then you can kind of cut a hole at the end of the cone and squeeze them out like an icing bag when you next want to use them, and I find that's really, really helpful.
And Archie Works wants to know, does the acrylic sheet make the ink spread out when you print, almost like bleeding out?
Ooh, that is a good question. I haven't noticed it as a problem. I mean, this is quite thick. I mean, by my standards, it's hugely thick. But so we'll see, is the answer to that. Okay, so now I've got it inked up, and I think I've got it wiped clean. Though every time I say that, I can see another little bit that I should be getting rid of. And all this faffing is really, really important, because those tiny little bits will show. Okay, I bet I haven't got them all. So we might have a few extra pebbles to hide that at the end. Okay, so then what I need to do is to bring the paper down. Now, when I hand print this, I could, if I were using a press, I'd put this through a reasonably high pressure etching press, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hand print it. So oddly, I'm going to print this through the plastic side and not through the paper side. And that's so I can see what I'm doing. So bear with me one moment while I just lose some of this ink, because I just know that I'm going to put my arm in it or something. I'm just going to pop those out of the way. That's better. I feel a bit more secure now I've done that. Okay, and I might as well leave it on the light box for the moment. Let's switch that off. So, a variety of things here. I'm going to use, this is, I think this is florist's acetate, but we would normally use a slightly heavier duty one than this. This isn't the stuff you use to wrap browser prints, is it? It's very flimsy.
It's the old stuff we had for wrapping browser print.
Okay,
which
so
we stopped using because it was too thin.
So, but the point is, I have some thin. Is it cellophane? What is it?
Yeah,
cellophane. Let's call it cellophane. And the reason I'm using this is because if I start rubbing directly on the drawing, it's going to lift the drawing off. So I just want something to protect that drawing. And then I've got a variety of things here. I don't really own this. This is Ben's beautiful, beautiful agate burnisher that he uses, because Ben does all my framing, and periodically he needs to smooth things out. Or press things down, and he owns this glorious thing that I'm very jealous about. So I've borrowed that.
Laura thinks that she can't have one too.
No, I have a
But
horrible plastic thing that does the same job. So that's like my totally inferior plastic version. And then, yeah, this is my mum's spoon. So my mum, my late mum's kitchen spoon. And the nice thing with this is that you can vary the pressure where you print. So I'm going to try and create some stripiness here, but you can actually see through the plastic when you're pressing down what's going on. So you can see through. I probably wouldn't be able to show you. Yeah, so I've just started rubbing there, and I'm starting to get that texture through. And you can actually control that. It won't show so much here because I've got a mishmash of colour. But if you were doing a sheet of colour, then you would have your drawing, you've got your ink, and you can literally draw with your drawing as a reference and impress that drawing accurately, which is really, really handy if you wanted to do that. So I'm just going to go over this, rubbing down, and take the print. So I'm taking my time here. What you need to be careful is that you don't do something totally unsympathetic. Like if you're doing what I nearly came unstuck doing. I was printing the C in the big one, and I started doing like circles. And what you really, really don't want is to start having circular marks in the C. Fine to have sort of side to side marks, but not circular ones. And I'm just going to take my time going over this. The other thing you can do is to take off some of the ink before you print. Now I haven't done that here, but you can ghost print before you print. So if you want lighter areas, so let's say I wanted a lighter area here, I would get myself tear a piece of newsprint, and before I put the printing paper over the ink, I'd just pat a bit off with a little patch of newsprint and make the ink thinner in areas if I wanted to. So you can make kind of quite subtle adjustments. So I'm not noticing any ink spreading with this. Right, okay. So now you can see, oh, I'm burning out again.
Oh,
I don't know what's happened there. Bear with us a second. Ben's switch the cameras. That's better. Now I can lift it up. So you can see I've got all that texture going on, and it's not 100% coverage. And if I feel like I want to add a little bit more, there's nothing stopping me going back at this stage and thinking, right, okay, let's have a little bit more around here.
Tara wants to know where we got the acrylic sheet from.
Oh, that's a good question.
I regret I can't remember the company, but we did buy a big sheet of it. It was a metre by 2 metres.
Do you know how much it cost?
And it was about £70.
Ooh.
But that gave us a lot of smaller pieces because it cuts quite easily.
It cuts really easily. The other thing is you can use it again and again. You don't lose it. So it's not a, you're not wasting it. So I'm just going to use my little burnishing. Oh, I forgot my sheet. Plastic. So I'm just going to use my little burnishing tool. So you could be quite sketchy if you wanted to with it. Okay, that's better. And so now I've just given myself a bit more three-dimensionality. I can't even say the word. It looks a bit more three-dimensional.
Right. Three-dimensionality.
Yeah, exactly. In that rock. So being transparent, I find it just makes it a lot easier. The way I've been shown, and I've seen a lot of people work, is to have an opaque sheet and do the drawing onto the sheet and just keep the inks very transparent. But I like this because here I've inked a little bit beyond the lines and things, and if I need to know that, I can just go to my drawing and adjust it without it hurting the print. I would just come back and get my pen and make the new outline. And I can also, like here for example, I've got some ink and I haven't got any stones there. So say I needed to ink a colour up to these rocks, and that bit's got ink in and I wasn't expecting it to, I can now just draw where that new outline is, so that when I put my new ink on, I can wipe up to the corrected outline, so I can make adaptations as I'm going along so that I don't overlap colours if I don't want to. So it's quite flexible like that. So now I've got the basis to start working with pastels and things. I'm going to go on to the next stage. Bear with me one moment while I do a little swap out. Get the next set of stuff up. So what I've got are some oil pastels. I've got some... oh, right, he's going to come and do a little tour. Ben's going to just make a little bit of an adjustment so that we can see a bit closer up. I've got some silicone, sort of, I don't know what you'd call these, silicone brushes maybe, little nibs here for pushing stuff about. I've got some, these are Posca pastel, oil pastels, and I was looking for something that I could get a sharp point on. So these, let me get one that's got a label that you can see. Oh, sorry, he's upset his tripod. These are these Posca oil pastels, and I really like them because they come in a variety of colours and you can sharpen them like a pencil. They won't give you a really hard line, but they will give you a much more accurate line than these guys, which are, these are Faber-Castell, they're oil pastels, and I use them to paint with as well as to draw with. So I've got my final tool, which is the really important one, which is Stabilo pencil here. And this is it's sort of like a graphite pencil, but it will draw on plastic and glass, and I find it's really good for drawing on this. I'm just looking to see what it's called. It's
we have a new view.
No, it doesn't have a name. It's by Stabilo anyway, and it's for drawing on glass and various other things like that. So those are useful. And then I have got some white spirit.
If you look at the screen when you're showing people, love, you'll see it's the phone on the light box beside you.
Right, okay.
That's giving you a much closer.
Pretty harsh colour. So what, we've got a question down at the bottom, but there's a heart in the way, so I can't see. Oh, here, can I scroll up? How would you print the lines if you wanted them included? Oh, right, okay, so the lines, I'm going to start working to create those. So I'm going to go in. I don't want to do anything too bold to start with. I don't want to sort of get a feel for the shape of this rock. So I'm going to go in with my Posca grey, and I'm just going to have a look at see what my thinking was with this rock. Okay, so it sort of goes under there and round. So what I'm doing here is not that this will show particularly, I'm just getting my head around how this rock works. So it comes up like that, and then it comes across. So because this doesn't show very much, it allows me to sort of get sketching. And if I go disastrously wrong, I can kind of change it. So this probably looks like I'm not doing very much at the moment, but really it's allowing me to work out where my rocky shapes are with this big rock and then the one next to it. So this gives me some freedom to work and to see where the planes of things are. Okay. Before I make anything too decisive. So I'm now going to get a slightly, try not to make a mark on the other because this is quite wet. I'm going to go in with my pencil. Can I have some newsprint, do you think? It's in a basket under the light box there. So now I'm going to start working with this pencil and teasing the image out. Thank Thank you. Just a little bit nervous of making marks on it. So I had my original drawing, but I'm not necessarily sticking to that, because what I'm looking for is how that ink has gone down and what that's suggesting to me. So here, I'm liking the way this is working, so I'm going to start fooling about with how the ink is lying here. So I'm sort of, when I ink up, I'm sort of following the drawing with the roller, but it's not exact. And if I want to change the texture at all and make it denser, then I can use these.
Sylvia McNally asks, would you normally do these lines whilst it's wet, or do you do it to dry for a while?
Well, I would love to tell you that I'm really patient and I wait for it to dry because it's better that way. But the fact is that I do it when it's wet because I can't wait. But it's in some respects it's better to do it when it's dry, but in other respects it's nice to do it when it's wet, because you can push the ink around and work with it a little bit more. So here, for example, I'm just looking at this rock here. So I think what we'll do is we'll have it coming round here and up here. And then back on itself. So a lot of my drawing, regardless of whether it's for monoprinting or drawing to create a print, is feeling my way around the shape of things, which I'm kind of doing here. So I'm thinking actually that I don't quite like that. So what I'm going to do is push that about a bit and make that a little bit darker, make it part of the rock. So if I want to make it darker, I'm going to go in and manipulate. And then I can push that line about. If I really don't like it, I can go and get some white spirit on my brush and move it. And I can also go back. This is a white Posca here, and change it slightly like that. And so that rock face has changed a little bit from what I drew, but I don't really mind that, because it's quite nice to play with it and work out where things are. So here, for example, that's going to be a nice pebble, so let's just take that away from the rest of the drawing for a moment. And where I think I want it to be a little bit darker, I might come in and add a little bit of grey. And I'm just going to go back. So this pencil, it seems to be activated by the ink. It's also helped by being sharp, but when it's not as sharp, it can go a bit soft and a bit wishy-washy. So I like to try and work with sharp pencils. So obviously here I'm working on a rock face, which is, you know, it can be any shape you want. But if you were working with a tree or something like that, you might have to do a bit more pushing and pulling with your paint, with the ink, to get the right shapes going, and adding shadow. So what I would suggest is to start pale, and then you can add the shadow to pull it into the shape that you want. So here, let's say I'm going with this. I quite like lines in the rocks. Let's have some lines on the rocks there. So I'm already starting to pull those out. Now I am going to pinch a little bit of ink back from the inks that I've been using. Let's have a little bit of, you can't see that on the camera, I'm just going to move these into the line of the camera in a second.
Where would you like? Top camera again?
Yeah, if you want to, that'd be great. I'm just showing that I'm pulling out some of my printing ink, and I'm just going to dilute it a little bit with white spirit. So I'm just, if I pop that on the top there, I dilute it a little bit with white spirit so that I can paint with it. The other thing I can do is I can colour correct it if I want to by using, that's particularly horrible green, but just mix a bit of green in there. And then I've got control of it, so if I wanted to create myself a, let's have some pebbles, let's have one there, and put some in there. So it's not that I'm painting the whole pebble in, I'm just giving myself enough of a suggestion for me to go with it. And you can maybe see the pen is really dark with that. But I think the thing is to look at the shape of the inking and to really just enjoy playing with how it goes and see where it takes you. So here I'm a bit bothered about this angle. If we go, can we go back to close-up, love?
Sure.
Are we back on close-up? Yes.
Take a while for it to refresh.
Oh, it takes a while for it to refresh. So I've got two stones next to each other which are too samey. Don't like that. So I'm going to colour one a different colour. So let's have one a bit more blue. So I've got my oil pastel, and is it really that time already? Oh my God, I thought that. Right, and I'm going to make that one blue. Well, I'm not going away just yet. I'm just going to faff with this a little bit longer so you can see. And I'll show you at the end. I feel this has been a live stream thin on questions though.
Carrie says, is the Posca stick oil-based or wax-based?
I think it's oil-based. It seems to behave like
uni-pastel?
It is, let me have a look. It is a yes, a uni pastel. Let's just have a look. Let's see if it's oil-based. Yes, it's oil-based because it's now diluting. So I've now diluted that oil pastel so that I can do the little dark shadows in between the rocks here. So that's the Posca black that I've diluted here. And again, over here, I'm not sure I like what's going on too much, so I am just going to...
Slightly random question here from Sylvia McNally. She says, we've just been given some logs for burning, and she would like to try and use some of the wood for printing. Does she have to leave the wood to dry before she has a go?
Oh, now that is interesting. I would say that if are you printing it as Japanese woodblock or Western woodblock? Oh, I like that rock. I would give it a go. Maybe choose a bit that you're not totally in love with yet, and give that a little go and see how it works. And if it's a disaster, then you've still got the good stuff to use. But I don't see, if you're hand printing and you haven't got to worry about getting it into a press or anything, I don't see why you shouldn't get away with it. What you'll probably find is that it will distort a bit. Right, I'm just going to put a little bit of line onto there, just to... So I'm using the oil pastel here. Just wash that out. and I can mess about with a little bit more terps to move things.
So she's definitely going to have a go at
Excellent.
monoprinting now.
Good. The other thing that I quite like, which I'll show you, is that you can actually scratch into the ink, which is now not going to work, of course, because I said I'll show you. You can use here I'm using a palette knife, but you can actually draw into the ink with a palette knife as well, and that's quite nice for creating textures. I'm not even going to you can see it, actually you can see it better here. What's going on here, and let me hold this up to is that the ink has gone onto the paper, but it's not been pressed right down into the paper. So when I draw, I'm compressing that ink into the paper, so it's giving me darker lines. So I can actually use that. Effectively, I'm rubbing the ink, but I'm rubbing it in small areas. And that's the other joy of hand printing, is you're not putting it on completely flat, so you can push it around, which is really nice for something like a rock or texture or whatever. You can really start to push it about. What I would really like is to, let me just hold this up to the camera a little bit. What I really want to show you is that my favourite, which is this little pebble here, but hopefully you can see there how I'm beginning to pull that out. I'm really distressed by the fact that this is looking so kind of contrasty and ugly in this light, because these colours are really very pretty. So what I will do is take some photographs of this and put it out on social media so that you can see it a little bit better. So I'm just going to faff with this for a little bit, even though we are at time. So please don't feel you have to hang around if you have things to go to do, but I just would like to carry on for a bit and get this. This is Paul Ben is now stuck with this. I'm like this whenever I'm printing. So
Ben's going to make his brother go and make tea, I think.
Yeah, a cup of tea would be nice. So you can see how this pencil is working over the ink. It doesn't work, if the ink's very thick, then it doesn't work anything like as well. Okay.
Simon's been dispatched to the kitchen.
He's been dispatched to the kitchen. Okay, now I'm going to make a colour change here, so let's have some nice bright kind of orangey colour. So we open tomorrow. Actually, we have a party tomorrow evening. Spring Fling kicks off with a private view, so we've got to sort that out tomorrow.
Marcia would like to know what the effect would be if you would use slightly wet paper. Don't think you've tried that, have you?
I'm not sure it would be absolutely sympathetic to the oil-based ink, to be honest. I think you might find that the ink doesn't like it. But I'm not sure it would improve things. Here I'm just working, also I'm pushing things around with white spirit, and I think on wet paper that might not be as easy. You can see I'm just dropping in a bit of orangey colour there.
If you print intaglio, you're using slightly wet paper and oil-based inks, but the pressures are immense. Whereas the pressure here is relatively light.
Yeah, I mean, I've just used literally a few bits of spoon to... So here I want a bit more definition, so I'm going to go in with the oil pastel. And work with that. So really, it's the way that I'm doing my monos is very kind of loose and letting the inking almost choose where I'm going to put shapes. So maybe now that you can see how I do it, they kind of maybe make more sense. But I also like drawn lines, so I do like the ability to go in there with the pencil, which is now getting a bit blunt. And sometimes I dip the pencil in white spirit, which makes it darker. So now I'm going to go in and get a lot looser with this. And this is nice because this is how I would draw when I'm preparing to print. I do a design drawing, and this is much more kind of how I would do that. But I do, it's nice to try, and as I say, you don't need to have a printing press, and I dare say you could do very well with water-based ink if that's what you've got. I don't think you could push it about maybe quite as well as you can with oil-based, because oil-based is kind of forgiving. It lets you move the pigment around. But you do not need a printing press for this. That great big one that I did entirely by hand, and it honestly, it wasn't that bad a deal to do it by hand. Right, okay. I think I'm going to quit and see if we can show you this really well. So you can see I can loosen up. Now I've worked out where stuff is, I can kind of, the drawing can get a lot looser. And I'm going back over some of my lines just to make them a little bit bolder.
Rona says, given that you're using a pencil in the mix, would the image have to be fixed on completion?
Oh, that's a really, really good question, and it's probably a good idea. This is actually a grease pencil, but I guess, as I say, I'm quite new to this, but I think fixative's a good idea unless it's going to immediately be framed, I guess, and be protected like that. But this isn't an ordinary pencil that I'm using, this is a grease pencil. So it's not quite the same as a graphite one. All right, okay. Oh, that was such fun. I feel that was sort of just me having a lot of fun, and you guys had to be dragged along with that. So I hope that you have learnt something, and that it was interesting to watch. And I'm just going to do a couple of little bits and then I'm going to stop, I promise. There we go, I'm just filling in. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just take that off the paper. Normally I wouldn't pull it like this. I'm only doing it so that I can show, and the tape's very sticky. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go the other way and just take it off the back of the paper. It's probably easiest, that's better. So that I can show you. What's the best camera, Ben, so that we can see?
I think I'll go to the top.
Yeah, I'm going to hold it close to the top camera so that you can see it properly.
If you hold it up now.
Okay. So if I hold that up, then hopefully you can see how that's working and how I've created those lines. I am using in terms.
Do you have any plans on doing a European tour?
No, I can't even get out of the house at the moment. There's so much DIY that we have to do to get this house
what type
sorted
of
out.
paper will work for this?
The paper here that I've used here, I think this is Reeves. This was a little bit of Reeves that I was using, rag paper. I've done it with Fabriano. Normally I would say use lightweight washi, but in this instance I wouldn't recommend it. You need something tough enough to have all that pushing around, where I'm adding white spirit and playing with pencil and stuff like that, because you need to push and pull it. I have to say that this on the camera, I'm looking at it at the moment, and it's not picking up as much detail as I would like. So I will take some photos and put it onto social media.
On the phone camera again.
Okay. Right, I'm going to try and do that because look at it, it's horrible. It looks really horrible.
It's quite contrasty.
Yeah, it's really contrasty. Yeah. Would I ever do
camera?
Online workshops? I don't think so, simply because it's just not a way I've ever thought of working, and also now that I've got the studio to teach in, that's kind of working out quite nicely. And I'm kind of wanting to make more print, so if anything I'll probably do a bit less teaching going forward. So what kind of pencil did I use? I am using an aquarellable. Which one are we at? Are we at this?
Hang on.
Which one are we on?
There we go. You're on the GoPro.
On the GoPro, which is
this
the
one.
photo of that one there. Right, it's
Too close.
Stabilo Aquarelle, and it's a. If you look for China graphs, it should come up, or grease pencil, or pencil for writing on glass and plastic. So this is one that's got like a graphite. You can get them in red and blue and green and white. This one is oil-based, and it's like a greasy graphite pencil. So I think that Ben probably wants me to stop. Personally, I quite like to carry on, but I think I probably had better stop because it is Spring Fling this weekend, and it's open studios, so we're going to have a host of people coming, and we need to prepare for that. So if you are anywhere near us, we're in Kirkcudbright, Dumfries and Galloway, then there are 17 artists in all in the town who are part of Spring Fling. And Spring Fling is a curated open studio, so it's not any old rubbish. You have to be quite good to be asked. And so,
how did you get in there?
Oh, thank you. That's very rude. I hope you're shocked that you would say that. So yes, it's 17 of us here in town, and there's a whole variety of techniques, and not all printmakers by any means. There's all sorts of people going on. So it will be quite a good event. We're having a party from 6 till 8 tomorrow night, and then we are open over the weekend on a Monday. We're also open late on Saturday night with drinks, so that should be quite fun. So thank you very much for watching, and we went a bit over time, but I don't suppose anybody really minds that. And I will take photographs of this and try and capture actually how subtle it is, which doesn't really show on this tutorial, and I will catch you next time.